Alright, welcome to our final episode of Jeopardy! Now we're into hard mode. Visually it's not going to look a lot different than medium mode does, but this time Not Optimus Prime will have to take on slightly better AI players. And yes, it does make a difference. So as we move into the first round here, remember, I'm still going to stick with the same sort of strategies that I've been using up till now, even though we've moved into hard mode. And that is to try to get rid of the categories I'm least comfortable with first. Like, what are you made of? And if you've ever been to Madame Tussauds, you know that you are made of wax.
Please pick again, player one. Moses by Michelangelo at San Pietro in Vincoli.
All right. Now, Michelangelo liked, being a sculptor. So this is not a painted Moses. So I decided to be cute and refer the material that he sculpted Moses out of as stone. I was a little concerned that he might have done it out of bronze, not being particularly familiar with this statue. But I was wrong about that, and now we are in the negatives. So, that good start we had just a second ago, not really holding up so far for us. I'm not really that familiar with Cheers. I know Tecumseh is an Indian, or a Native American, the Shawnee chieftain who built a confederacy in the early 1800s. But it turns out that he had a wooden statue in the Cheers bar. These soldiers, however, I recognized relatively quickly what they're made of. These are the famous terracotta warriors in China. If you happen to watch the third Mummy movie, which I don't necessarily recommend that you do, you would have seen those guys there. Now, this one, sort of a giveaway clue. Donatello was famous for casting in bronze with certain statues, but you'll notice I did not ring in time to get there. And then this AI player went for a category that I would have avoided to start off just because I thought this would have been easier for me. So who would Congress have granted a pension to? Well, it could be no other person than Mary Todd Lincoln. Didn't know how they were going to put that up there. So I went for Mary Lincoln, and that was accepted.
Player one, where do we start?
And then I moved to another category I wasn't comfortable with. And this was cute too, because this is something I didn't know. I did not know that sausage came from the Latin word for salted. Which basically means that, this is a preserved meat.
Select again.
And I stayed with breakfast.
Is also used as a verb meaning to speak or write evasively.
I really wasn't sure what to do with this.
The correct response.
Fortunately, no one else knew what to do with it either. And then it turned out to be waffle, which, really should have stood out more than it did for me. My first thought here was Eggs Benedict, but I'm not really familiar with Eggs Benedict as a dish, so I've never really eaten it. So maybe that would have clicked for some of you. It certainly clicked for the second AI player.
In 1890,
and she decided to keep us on the breakfast path. For this one, I got stuck thinking of Mrs. Butterworth, who doesn't make pancake mix, so I knew that wasn't the right answer. It turned out to be Aunt Jemima.
You pick again, please. You said of this general, I can't spare this man.
Again, the Lincoln category was going to be a big one for me. Spent some time with the Civil War early on, and so I knew this was U.S. Grant. Of course, Lincoln said this when other people were suggesting that he fire Grant. Of course, Grant was one of the few generals who had actually fought and won battles for Lincoln at that point. And I didn't know. I felt like I should have known this. But as you can tell, I don't eat French toast.
A lot of categories, player 3. The number one cause of death in the United States isn't cancer.
Now, this question I knew the answer of because I had seen this before. This is heart disease. As I go around having fun with the word bank here. And so now we are almost back. I mean, we've been back in the positive since, the Lincoln category. And then this picture is pretty obvious as to what's going on here. So I would have,
Player 1.
So this is softball. And that is going to take us well, no, we're still trailing. So we're still not in first place yet, but we're going to get into first place here on this question because, as you know, the 2000 Olympic Games were held in Sydney, Australia. Now it's just a matter of spelling Sydney right so that the word bank would recognize it. Yeah, unfortunately it did. So we didn't have to do that much work at all. And now I'm sitting at 2,200, and I have my first lead of the game, and almost immediately they say, "Hey, you want to lose your first lead of the game?"
What are you going to wager?
And I said no. So I only bet $200.
2008, Rebecca Sony won Olympic gold.
And it's a good thing that I did, because although I know Natalie Coughlin is a swimmer, and the question obviously suggests that, I did not know what stroke she did, and I attempted to enter freestyle and accidentally hit the wrong button too early. But it's not like freestyle would have been the right answer anyway.
Turn to you, player 1. The 1972 games.
So now we're back, and we get a question we've seen before, just in a different category. So we're back to the 1972 games in Munich. You remember in a previous episode, there was a whole category on things that happened in Munich, and this was one of them.
Right you are. Please.
But now I'm back in the lead again,
Jin Young Lee and Jinmun Park were members of this country's 2000
and I stayed away from
football team.
this question because I just didn't feel comfortable. And it turns out that it was South Korea. I mean, they were very Asian-looking names, but I didn't get it. This question was also written strangely, because what they really want is the name of the Roman leader for whom Caesarean sections are known, and that's Julius Caesar. But mentioning the cuneiform tablet might have made you think that they were looking for something much older, because the Romans, of course, are not 2000 BC old.
The death in Venice is from this waterborne disease.
Waterborne disease should have been a clear indicator here. So we're not talking about the Black Death. We're instead talking about cholera.
Okay, let's get back into this. Player 2.
And then we continue. Then she continues us down this category. And to be honest, I should have gotten this. I was thinking it was probably the 70s, but it might have been the 80s, so I didn't answer at all, and it turned out to be the 70s. Fortunately, nobody else answered, so that $800 just sort of disappeared. And this I knew because of, fortunately, fortunately, or however you want to refer to it, spent a lot of time looking at the third world kind of social studies. And so I knew that Africa is the place where the highest fertility is. Now we're messing around with words. So if we mess around with attitude, we'll get altitude. So that was just kind of a fun one. And again, word up is going to be a lot like this. It's just word games, not necessarily on the same pattern, because obviously synonym, there was no letter rearrangement or anything to get to synonym. Okay, now hole for hollow place, particularly a tooth, allowed me to jump on cavity here.
Player one, you start. It's one of the bones of the forearm, or a line from the
and
circle.
This one, allowed me to jump on radius. Yes, you have a bone in your arm that's called the radius. And I don't think that the circle part should have surprised anybody. So here's the last one. And this is fascinating to me because I didn't realize that this was where this came from. Plagiarism, comes from the Latin of kidnapper. So essentially you're kidnapping someone else's ideas. So that was kind of a neat discovery to make through the course of this game. And then we got to go back to Abraham Lincoln. Now, the answer to this is Stephen F. Douglas. Douglas got the second most number of votes in the 1860 election, but because of John Breckinridge's appearance on Southern ballots, he did not win a lot of electoral votes. And since we referred to Lincoln in a general already, I didn't think that we would go back to generals again, but this is a very famous quote that Lincoln made referring to George McClellan. This was made, in fact, I believe, after the Battle of Antietam. And McClellan was relieved not too long after this comment. And then finally, the man who was president alongside, or for the Confederate States, that would be Jefferson Davis. And I think we took the entire Lincoln category, so that was pretty good for us. So going into the second round, we've got a pretty decent lead. We're up by 7,000. And also important, neither player could double up their score to reach us at that point. Although, we're not in the final Jeopardy situation yet. So here we go with the last set of categories here in this Jeopardy playthrough. And someone else has control. So let's hear it, player 3. Yep, and Grimlock once again is attacking our idle character. So we have our Grimlock sighting. I don't know if you guys keep track of those or not. This is more of a... You definitely would have had to hear this in context. You've definitely heard it. Yeah, the sound of one hand clapping. You've definitely heard it somewhere, but you may not have realized that it was a Zen Buddhist thing. And this I should have known, because this is the state bird of the state where I live. And this is the cardinal.
2, you start us off. The ruby-throated one of these can migrate.
Fortunately, I was able to figure out this bird right pretty quick. So, the most famous ruby-throated bird is the ruby-throated hummingbird. It's probably what you think of when you think of a hummingbird. And of course, they very famous for how small and fragile they are, but yet how much they get for the wings. Now this one was good because I knew it was the 1001. Problem is, I didn't know exactly what they were going to give me. They did not give me anything to work with here through 1000. So I had to check other letter combinations. So I went to the numbers themselves, and yes, it was fortunate that it gave me that option, because we almost ran out of time on that. And the only clue that I can really give you here, if you don't know what this is the fact that he's a playwright. But I did not know that particular answer.
Based in Chicago, this financial services provider merged with JP Morgan Chase in 2004.
I thought I might have remembered this, but 2004 was a little bit early for things to start merging. So I
Player 2, choose again.
So anyways, that brought us back into trouble, because now our lady friend here is going to bet everything she has on whether she can determine types of birds from the 3 things that she said, and she was able to do that. And for the first time in a while, we are behind, and thus you understand why I wanted to be more than double ahead coming into double Jeopardy here. Now, the pirate that Yul Brynner plays is Jean Lafitte. I could not, even though I've seen this film a couple of times, I could not remember his name. And so that's why I did not answer it. I didn't really know this either, but because I was behind, I took a guess that they wanted to go to Mars, since they ended up at Mardi Gras. And Mars and Mardi Gras have the same first 3 letters. But I'm still $800 behind here.
Critic Michael Kleinschrodt said of this star in The Big Easy, the very best example of a New Orleans accent.
I didn't remember the movie The Big Easy. I've never seen it. And so I did not realize that Dennis Quaid was in it. I do know that some actors are capable of terrible accents of the places they're trying to portray, but you know, what you're going to do. Now, this question brought up another sort of popular question, and that is to bring in herons. You know, we seem to keep coming back to herons. I think the last episode we had a question about a great blue heron, and here we're given the great blue, and we need to get to the heron from there. We're still not quite back, but we'll get back here, because Come On Get Happy is the theme to the Partridge Family. So no, I didn't really know this clue from the first thing that was offered. It was the second that allowed me to get it and then to get back on top. And then I decided to go back into the category that I was weak in. Now the movie is Jezebel, and I actually figured it out, but I didn't buzz in time. The only reason I really knew it is because I saw a thing about the making of Gone with the Wind, and Jezebel was sort of a movie from the similar era. Yeah, and I didn't know that either, although I do have something of a soft spot for Steve McQueen movies. It's because he reminded me of a friend from college, at least in his looks. This one was, you know, if you saw Santa Ana, then the obvious place to be is in Mexico. The Empire of Mexico, you know, was an actual thing from time to time. So I moved over to this one with the 4 legs and the 2 legs. So my assumption was that this was China, but I didn't feel comfortable enough to buzz in, and so that allowed player 2 to tie the score. And here we have to identify a 2-legged person. It's bad, so this would be Polyphemus, and he, of course, is a Cyclops. One of the several Cyclops, or Cyclopes, excuse me, that lived on the island of Sicily. This one I also like too. So this is, again, a good character, but Shadowfax was ridden by Gandalf. All I can figure, I've never read the Lord of the Rings books, but I have seen the movies. All I can figure is that that scene must be more impressive in the books than it is in the movies. Because in the movies, he just sort of summons the horse. So now I've got a problem. I'm in the lead, but not by much, so I decide to only wager 1,000. So if it screws up, I'll keep the lead. But fortunately, I'm given a Greek myth question, which is right up my alley. And I know that this is the Minotaur, as you may have known too. Minotaur, a popular beast, even outside of the Greek myth. And then Chiron, of course, was the learned centaur. Most of the centaurs were kind of brutish creatures. Chiron was a little bit different, and because of his goodness, the gods gave him immortality, which he later then gave up because he entered a situation where he was in crippling pain. All right, so here we are with waterways. So what sea lies near Cuba and Mexico? Well, that is the Caribbean. And as I decide whether or not I want to spell it incorrectly or not, fortunately I did not. This is another fun one, because the Roman Empire entirely surrounded the Mediterranean Sea. And so they didn't even call it something else. They called it Mare Nostrum, which is our sea. So now we're building up a little bit of a buffer here. Astrakhan, Russia, which is located in on the shores of the Caspian Sea. So that tells you what they are looking for here. One of the other things about the word bank is that you get to see what some of the answers to other things might be. So there's got to have been a Caspar Weinberger question somewhere in here. And of course, on the other end of the Suez Canal is the Red Sea. So again, not terribly difficult, despite the fact that we are in hard mode here. And $9,000 in the lead. The Crimea. The Crimea, of course, is a peninsula surrounded by the Black Sea. And so the answer for this could be none other than that Black Sea. And that leaves us only with emperors. Now, it doesn't mean that, obviously the first question was about Mexico, so these can be about any emperors. Alfonso VI, a ruler in Toledo, therefore he would have controlled Christians and Muslims, since Muslims controlled much of Spain during that period of time, but I didn't feel comfortable going there. This question I guessed wrong because I confused a French emperor with a French king. And so I assumed that this question was referring to the line of Louis in the Bourbon family, but no, because those guys aren't emperors. They're kings. The only time France was controlled by emperors was during the rule of the two Napoleons. And therefore, their last names would have been, as player 2 will get, Bonaparte. 2 questions left, and then our final Jeopardy question. Very famously, this individual was crowned on Christmas Day. His name is Charlemagne, the great king of the Franks. And he was made a Holy Roman Emperor, or an Emperor of the Romans. It depends on what kind of terminology you want to look at, because there's not much that Charlemagne has to do with the Holy Roman Empire that eventually followed. This is a fascinating cartouche. And I don't know why they thought that, if you can't read hieroglyphs, I don't know why they thought that the ruler of Heliopolis was going to help you solve that question. So it turns out to be Ramses, and that's not terribly helpful. There are 11 kings bearing the name of Ramses. Only a couple of them have that ruler of Heliopolis appellation. So here we have U.S. presidents, but instead of going crazy on the bid, I go with just enough to defeat a double wager, by the second player. And the only president who never lived in the District of Columbia. And of course, that has to be before the District of Columbia was constructed, and the White House was not finished by the time that John Adams moved in there. And so George Washington is the only president who did not live there. Now, player 2 did something interesting. They didn't do double their bet. They basically did enough that if I screwed up trying to match their double bet, they could still beat me. But I take it out here, and that's the end of hard mode for our look at Jeopardy. And next time, we might move on to something else that's blue and probably moves a little bit faster than this. See you then.